Hello, friends. It is good that we might gather back together again for another section of Pastor's Ponderings. Today, as we gather together, and as Christians gather together all around the world to celebrate the feast of Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, it seems incredibly fitting that we would pause today and take the time to look at the sacramental vessels that help deliver the precious body and blood of Christ to us each and every Sunday. And so the first two vessels that I would like to look at and talk about today are the ciborium and the flagon. These are the vessels that we get to watch come down the aisle before us during the offertory. They come down the aisle with the offering plates. And the reason that that happens is that the elements that are presented for the Eucharistic feast, the elements that become the body and blood of Christ, the gift where Christ comes and encounters us in this world, they're not brought forth by Pastor Short or myself. They're presented by the people of the church. And so just as the monetary offerings are the gifts of the people of the church, so are the elements that become the sacrament around which we gather each and every Sunday. And so during the offertory, the ciborium and the flagon are brought forward with the rest of the offerings and brought up to the altar where the celebration of the Eucharist begins. And so the ciborium it's basically a cup with a cover that often has a cross on it, and when you open it up, you can see that there's all sorts of host in there. These hosts will become the body of Christ that will be an incredible gift for us in the sacrament. And the flagon will be filled with wine that will be poured into the chalice where it will become the blood of Christ, an incredible gift for us in the sacrament. You'll notice that the flagon is made of silver, and this ciborium is actually made of a mixture of silver and gold, depending on the area of it that you're looking at. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, precious metals, germs can't cling to them in the same way that they could porous cracks or crevices of plastic or other materials. But also, if this is the sacrament where God really physically, tangibly encounters us in this world, where he truly gives us his body and blood as true drink and as true food for our weary and broken souls. If this is really the sacrament where God comes to meet us, we want to encounter him with the best that we have to offer. And so the silver and the gold that we use for these sacramental vessels, they speak to the precious gift that we believe they contain. When we gather in the church and we look up front and we see this setup sitting on the altar, we know that our worship is going to be Eucharistic that day. And so what this setup is, we're going to go part by part and explain what each piece means and does. So first, you see that it has a color. And so last week, as we looked at the paraments on either side of me and we talked about the meaning of liturgical colors, the burse and the veil on the altar are one more way that we can introduce the liturgical color of the day and season of the church year. Additionally, if you start to take them apart, you have this thing here that it almost looks like a little baggie. You can open it up. It's sort of like a big fish mouth, really. But it's called a burse. And in addition to having the liturgical color for the day, this burse, it holds some of the supplies that we need that help us as we move through the Eucharistic feast. And so what we have in our burse would be a purificator, sort of a small cloth that acts a little bit like a napkin, and a corporal, which it's a larger cloth that gets laid down and everything sits on top of it, and it acts somewhat like a placemat. It helps us to deal well with the body and blood of Christ, and it kind of safeguards our practice for the day. So you have the purificator and the corporal that are in the burse each day. Then you have this thing that has a whole bunch of color, and we call this the veil. Now, the veil, in addition to adding liturgical color as well, it also helps to maintain a certain awe or reverence for what happens. A lot of times when you have something veiled, it builds your anticipation because you know there's something precious hidden behind it. And so the veil reminds us that there's something truly wonderful underneath. We look back to the Old Testament, and a lot of times we realize that God can't be looked upon because he's just too great to look upon, otherwise it would harm us. And so as we look at the Old Testament temple and different things throughout the Hebrew scriptures, there's times where wonderful things need to be veiled because they're just too great to look upon. And so with having a veil over some of the vessels that hold the sacrament, it reminds us that there's something truly wonderful held beneath them. And so when it comes time to move into that Eucharistic rite, we remove the veil and we fold it up. You notice we always try to fold things in threes as we're a Trinitarian people, and we'll set that off to the side with the burse. Underneath of the veil, you'll see that there is this square, stiff piece of material that we call a pall. Now, it's not the same kind of pall like you would put over a funeral casket. This is a pall that would go over the chalice. So here, it helps to give a little bit of shape and form to the veil as it goes over, but also sometimes you would see the pall placed over the chalice, and it would help to make sure that no bugs or anything got in. Some of these items are extremely practical in their use. And often you'll see that the palls tend to be stitched with a cross made of hand-stitched numerous crosses. Underneath of the pall, we have what we call the paten. And so this is the plate where the celebrant's host will be placed upon, and this is one of the items, in addition to the ciborium, that we'll use to distribute the host, the body of Christ. Underneath of that is a purificator that, again, it serves to sort of protect whatever's in the chalice. It also serves to protect the chalice from having metal clanking on metal. These are precious vessels, and so we try to protect the wonderful gifts that we have. And finally, we have the chalice. Into this, the wine will be poured, which will become in with and under the body and the blood of Christ. And so this is an incredibly precious gift and precious vessel as well. So friends, that's a very brief introduction to the sacramental vessels that bless and aid us in our worship here together at Trinity. I hope that you've learned maybe something you didn't realize before, and I hope that, if anything, you've come to appreciate the fullness and the gifts that the Church has that surround us each and every week, that it's such a joy to stop and remember and celebrate from time to time.